Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always excited to jump into these with you.
Today, we're tackling a pretty influential book in the personal growth world, Awaken the Giant Within. You know Tony Robbins?
Oh, yeah, definitely a household name.
So we're not just summarizing, though. We're going deeper. We're digging for those insights that can really make a difference.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so Robbins starts strong. One of the first things he throws at you, your past. It doesn't define you. It's the decisions you make right now that shape who you become.
Makes sense, but easier said than done sometimes, right?
Totally. He even tells this story really brings the point home. He meets a guy in a wheelchair who could have easily let his limitations define him. But instead, this guy chose to focus on making a difference, became a source of inspiration for everyone he met.
Wow, that's powerful. It really highlights the power we have to choose our perspective.
Exactly. And Robbins is all about empowering the individual, right? He says, you, our listener, you have that same power. You can change anything in your life right now just by making a decision.
It's a good reminder that we're not stuck, even when it feels that way.
So true. So thinking about that, what's one change you want to make? What pain are you associating with not changing?
Ooh, that's a good question to ponder.
And on the flip side, what incredible pleasure can you start linking to that new behavior, that change you want to see?
It's all about motivation, right? Finding what drives us.
Right. And speaking of motivation, Robbins goes deep into the forces behind our behavior, pain and pleasure. He argues they shape our destiny based on what we link them to. He even uses advertising as an example. Think about those old Levi's 501 commercials. They didn't make much sense, did they?
Now that you mention it.
Exactly. They weren't selling practicality. They were selling sex appeal, a lifestyle. They were linking pleasure to genes without actually talking about the genes.
It's kind of sneaky when you think about it, how they tap into those desires.
Totally. And Robbins suggests we can use that same principle not to manipulate, but to empower ourselves. To create change that lasts, we need to get real about the pain of not changing. What are the negative consequences of staying stuck? Then do the opposite. Link huge GE pleasure to the new behavior.
So we have to feel the discomfort of staying stuck. Then amplify the positive feelings of the change. Make it real in our minds.
Yes. It's like giving our brains a taste of the rewards to come. Robbins even suggests this exercise to make it practical. Think of a habit you'd like to break. Grab a pen and paper and write down all the pain that habit has caused.
It's about being honest with ourselves, really seeing those consequences.
Exactly. Then, on the other side of that paper, list all the pleasure you got from that habit, even if it's short-term.
So we understand why we do what we do, right? Like shining a light on those hidden patterns.
Exactly. Once you see it, you can start to shift it. And that brings us to the power of belief, a huge part of Robbins' philosophy and a concept he calls the master system.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Master system. Sounds intense. What's that all about?
It's like the blueprint for our behavior, the system that determines how we react to the world around us.
So like the operating system of our lives.
You got it. And he breaks it down into 5 parts: values, rules, identity, references, and emotional state. And we're going to unpack all of those, but first let's start with values, those guiding principles, the things that truly matter to us. Values, they're like our North Star, right?
Right.
Guiding us toward what really matters in life.
Exactly. The things we hold dear, the principles we want to live by. And, we might not even realize how deeply ingrained they are.
So then, how do we figure out what our values really are?
Robbins talks about moving toward values, and it's such a cool concept. It's about those positive emotions we want more of. Joy, love, fulfillment. What are you naturally drawn to?
Okay, so those are the moving toward. What about the flip side, the stuff we're trying to avoid?
Those are our moving away from values, those negative emotions we want to steer clear of. Maybe it's fear, insecurity, lack of fulfillment. By understanding both sides, we get a clearer picture of what truly motivates us.
It's like uncovering the why behind our actions.
Exactly. And once we've got a grasp on those values, we can look at our rules.
Rules. Hold on, what does he mean by rules in this context?
Think of them as these guidelines we've created, often subconsciously, for when our values are met or violated. They really dictate our responses in every area of life.
Give me an example. I'm not quite picturing it.
Okay, imagine someone who really values success. They might have this unspoken rule, like, I'm only successful if I make X amount of money. But then if they don't hit that arbitrary number, they feel like a failure, even if they've accomplished a ton.
So their own rule is working against them, setting them up for disappointment.
Precisely. And that's the risk with rules that are too rigid. Robbins wants us to examine them, ask ourselves, Are these rules helping or hurting? Are they even aligned with our values anymore?
So it's about making our rules work for us, not against us.
Yeah.
Make them more supportive of the life we want. And speaking of which, that brings us to another part of the master system identity.
Right, our identity. In Robbins' world, it's that story we tell ourselves about who we are. Our roles, our beliefs, what we're capable of, and what our limitations are.
It's that voice in our head that says, this is me.
Exactly. But here's the thing, that voice can either empower us or hold us back. Going back to our success-driven person, if their whole identity is tied to income level, they might not take risks, even if those risks could lead to more fulfillment.
So how do you shift your identity if it's no longer serving you? That seems tough.
Robbins is all about the power of questions. He says, ask yourself, who am I? But do it from a place of curiosity, not judgment.
So really digging deep into who we are, who we want to become.
Exactly. And, our identity is also shaped by our references, another piece of the master system.
References, you mean like our past experiences, the people we've known, the things we've learned?
Exactly. All those things shape how we see the world, right? And Robbins makes this point. Our references can either empower us or limit us. He talks about attending seminars multiple times, and his friends thought he was nuts.
Why would he do that?
He knew that each time he went back, he was a different person with a different set of references. He would pick up on new things, make new connections, because he had grown and changed.
It's like watching the same movie at different points in your life. You relate to it differently based on your experiences.
Precisely. And that's what's so cool about actively seeking out new and empowering references. Read books, talk to interesting people, travel. It's all about expanding your horizons.
Becoming a student of life, always learning and growing.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about the last element of the master system, our emotional state.
This one seems kind of obvious, right? Emotions play a huge role in how we experience everything.
They do, but what Robbins emphasizes is that we have more control over our emotional state than we think. He offers a ton of tools for mastering our emotions, from understanding how our physical body plays a role to using language in a more intentional way.
Okay, now I'm really curious. Tell me more about this toolkit. What kind of strategies are we talking about here?
Well, he talks about the power of physiology. You can shift your emotional state just by changing your posture, your breathing, how you move your body.
Like that saying, fake it till you make it.
Exactly. He also talks about asking empowering questions. He says, quality questions create a quality life. Successful people ask better questions, and as a result, they get better answers. What we focus on really does determine how we feel, so by asking questions that direct us towards solutions instead of problems.
We can shift our mindset from negative to positive.
Exactly. And speaking of staying positive, Robbins is a huge advocate for starting the day with what he calls morning questions.
Oh, yeah. Like, what am I grateful for? Or what am I excited about today?
Those are perfect examples. By starting with gratitude and excitement, you're setting a positive tone for the whole day. He also talks about this idea of transformational vocabulary.
Transformational vocabulary. I'm not familiar with that one.
It's really fascinating. It's about how the words we use to describe our emotions actually shape our experience of those emotions. For instance, if you say you're feeling devastated versus disappointed, those words carry very different weight.
Oh, absolutely. Devastated just feels so much heavier.
Exactly. Choosing words that more accurately reflect how we feel can help us avoid making things more dramatic than they need to be.
And on the flip side, we can use language to boost those positive emotions.
Yeah.
Like, instead of saying, I'm good, say, I feel fantastic.
Exactly. It's about using language to consciously create more of the feelings we want to experience.
You know, this reminds me of another cool concept Robbins talked about. The power of metaphors.
Metaphors. Such powerful tools. Robbins points out that we use them all the time without even realizing it.
Right. Like when we say, I feel stuck or I'm drowning in work, those are metaphors, and they create a very specific feeling, a very specific experience.
Exactly. Robbins says that we can actually change our emotional state by changing our metaphors. So instead of feeling stuck, we can ask ourselves, what would it feel like to be unstoppable?
I love that. Reframing the situation can make such a difference.
And he encourages us to experiment with different metaphors, see what resonates. If a metaphor isn't serving you, find a new one.
It's about taking control of our thoughts and emotions rather than letting them control us.
Exactly. And speaking of taking control, Robbins also talks about the importance of recognizing and understanding what he calls action signals.
Action signals. So those like red flags or something?
They can be, but Robbins' point is that those emotions we often see as negative are actually valuable messengers.
So he's saying those negative emotions are trying to tell us something.
Exactly. They're signals that something needs to change. He encourages us to really listen to those action signals, figure out what they're trying to tell us, and then actually do something about it.
Didn't he break it down into 10 core action signals? Discomfort, fear, hurt, anger, frustration.
Yeah. And disappointment, guilt, inadequacy, overload, and loneliness. 10 in total.
Okay, so that's a lot of signals.
It is, but for each one, he offers insights and strategies. For example, he talks about how frustration often comes up when we're not being flexible enough in our approach. If what we're doing isn't working, it's a sign to switch gears.
And then there's that feeling of being overwhelmed, like we have too much on our plates.
Right, and Robbins says that's often a result of, well, taking on too much at once. It's a signal to prioritize, delegate, and simplify. And then there's loneliness. He says it's often a sign that we need to nurture our relationships, build community, and connect with others.
So it's really about looking at these emotions differently. They're not the enemy. They can actually guide us towards growth if we let them.
Exactly. It's about embracing the full spectrum of our emotions.
Okay, so we've talked about mastering our emotions, understanding our values and beliefs. Now, let's talk about another big piece of personal growth, creating a future that we're excited about.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Robbins is all about setting those big, audacious goals. He calls them magnificent obsessions, goals that are so inspiring, so exciting, they pull you forward.
It's not about setting the bar low, is it? It's about dreaming big, those goals that light a fire under us.
Exactly. Robbins says the most important key to goal setting is to find a goal big enough to inspire you, something that will cause you to unleash your power. He talks about O.J. Simpson, who as a kid was determined to break all of Jim Brown's football records.
And he did it because he had this huge goal that motivated him.
Exactly. So how do we find those goals that light us up, those magnificent obsessions? Robbins suggests starting by brainstorming in different areas of our lives. What are your career goals, your relationship goals, financial goals, health goals? What about those dreams you've tucked away?
It's about getting specific, right? Don't just say, I want to be successful. Figure out what success actually means to you.
What does it look like? What does it feel like?
Exactly. Paint a clear picture in your mind.
So once we've got those goals, how do we actually achieve them?
Well, Robbins has a bunch of strategies for that. Breaking those big goals down into smaller, more manageable steps. Creating a plan of action. And, super important, surrounding yourself with people who support you. He also talks about conditioning your nervous system to believe in the possibility of achieving your goals.
I've heard him talk about visualization. Isn't that a big part of it?
Totally. Visualize yourself achieving your goals. Make it as real as possible in your mind. What do you see? What do you feel?
Planting those seeds of possibility.
Yes. And then taking consistent action. Don't just dream about your goals. Do something every day, even something small, to move closer to them. It all adds up.
Wow, we've covered a ton of ground here. The power of decisions, the role of pain and pleasure, the importance of beliefs, the MAFTER system, action signals, creating a compelling vision for the future. That's a lot.
We've been busy. And we're not done yet. Robbins dives into some other really important topics, like living your values, mastering your time, and the power of giving back.
Okay, so let's unpack those next. Starting with values, how does Robbins suggest we stay connected to what's important to us, especially in our busy lives?
He's a big believer in regular self-reflection. Ask yourself, what's truly important to me right now? Am I living in alignment with those values? And if not, what can I do to change that?
He tells this story about his daughter, Jolie. She landed what seemed like a dream job at Disneyland.
Yeah, it was something she had always wanted. She was so excited when she got it. But after a while, she realized it just wasn't fulfilling her. It clashed with her true values, which were all about creativity and personal growth.
So even though it was tough, she ended up leaving to do something more in line with her values.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of how sometimes we have to make those tough choices to be true to ourselves. Robbins even says, making a decision to live congruently with your values is not quitting.
It's about having the courage to do what's right for you, even if it's hard.
Exactly. And remember those moving toward and moving away from values we talked about earlier?
I do, yeah.
Robbins says that when we really understand those, that hierarchy of values, it helps us understand what motivates us. He actually shares a story about his own journey with this. He realized that he'd been putting so much emphasis on freedom that he was neglecting other important values, like intimacy and love.
So he made a conscious choice to reprioritize, to put love and intimacy higher on the list.
And the result? His relationships, his overall happiness, they totally transformed. It's such a powerful example of how understanding and living by our values can lead to a more fulfilling life.
Absolutely. Now, Robbins also talks about the importance of understanding and managing our rules. Remind us again, what does he mean by rules?
Right, so rules are essentially those unspoken guidelines we've created for ourselves, those things that dictate when we feel like our values are being met or when they're not.
He says, our rules are controlling our responses every moment we're alive.
Right, and it's not always in a good way. He uses the example of this CEO. The guy's company is killing it, doing really well, but he's constantly stressed and overwhelmed.
Wait, why? If his company was successful, shouldn't he have been happy?
Well, his rules for feeling successful were crazy demanding. He had to hit a certain revenue, a certain market share, a certain level of customer satisfaction, or he felt like he was failing.
So even though things were objectively good, he couldn't see it because of his own impossibly high standards.
Exactly. And that's what happens when those rules get too rigid or demanding. We set ourselves up for disappointment.
So how do we escape that trap? How do we create rules that actually help us instead of hold us back?
Robbins says we need to identify what our rules are in the first place. For different areas of our lives. Like, what are my rules for feeling loved, for feeling successful, for feeling happy? And then the key is to ask if those rules are really serving us. Are they realistic, achievable? Do they actually line up with our values?
And if not, we have the power to change them, make them more flexible, more supportive of the life we want.
It's about taking control of those scripts that are often running on autopilot in our minds. And then importantly, it's about communicating those rules to others. Like if we have certain expectations in a relationship, let's say, we have to actually communicate those to our partner. Don't expect them to read our minds.
It's about clarity and open communication.
Yeah.
So better for everyone involved.
Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about time. Robbins has a lot to say about mastering our time. Absolutely. One of the things he emphasizes is that so often we forget that time is a mental construct. It's relative. And our experience of it is almost entirely a result of where our focus is.
He talks about this idea of a mental time machine. What is that exactly?
It's basically this. Our experience of time is directly related to where we're focusing our attention. If we're dwelling on the past, we're operating from that past time frame. Our emotions will reflect that.
So we might feel regret, sadness, maybe even guilt.
Exactly. But if we're worrying about the future, then we're operating from a future time frame, and we're probably feeling anxious, stressed, or overwhelmed.
But if we can stay present, focused on this moment right now,
then we're operating from a present time frame, and that, according to Robbins, is where true power and joy exist.
Okay, that makes sense, but how do we actually do that?
Yeah.
How do we stay present when our minds are constantly pulling us in a million different directions?
Robbins suggests several strategies. One is practicing mindfulness. Just bringing our awareness to this present moment, to our senses, to our breath.
Just taking a moment to pause, observe, and notice what's happening around us, without judgment.
Exactly. He also suggests finding activities that naturally pull us into the present moment. Maybe it's spending time in nature, playing with kids, or getting lost in a hobby we love.
It's about finding those things that anchor us in the here and now.
Right. And it's not all about living solely in the present moment. He also emphasizes the importance of planning for the future, but not in a way that creates stress and anxiety. It's about creating a vision for the future that motivates and inspires us, and then taking steps to move towards it.
So using the future as fuel, not a source of worry.
Exactly. And this ties into the idea of managing our time effectively. Robbins says a lot of us feel overwhelmed because we're trying to do too much. We're reacting to demands instead of proactively designing the life we want.
We're letting our schedules control us instead of the other way around.
Exactly. So he suggests taking back control of our time. Set clear priorities, schedule our days, and get comfortable saying no to things that don't align with our goals.
It's about becoming the master of our time, not letting it master us.
Exactly. But it's not about becoming a robot and rigidly sticking to a schedule. It's about creating a framework that allows us to be more productive, more focused, and ultimately more fulfilled.
Right. It's about creating a schedule that supports us, not stresses us out. So, to wrap things up, Robbins explores one more super important topic: contribution. He says contribution is not just about grand gestures. It's the small, daily acts of making a difference that create a life of meaning.
I love that. It's those everyday acts of kindness, generosity, and service that really make the world a better place.
Exactly. And, Robbins believes that true heroes aren't these extraordinary beings. They're everyday people who show up and make a difference, even when it's hard.
He gives the example of John Templeton, who started a foundation that gives millions of dollars away each year to the people making a difference in the world.
That's incredible.
It is. And Templeton doesn't just focus on big names or celebrities. He focuses on the unsung heroes, those quietly making a difference in their communities.
It's a good reminder that we all have the power to make a positive impact in our own way.
Absolutely. And Robbins encourages us to find those ways to contribute, whether it's to our families, communities, or causes we believe in. And he says it doesn't have to be anything huge. It could be volunteering, donating to charity, or simply being more present for the people we love.
Even those small acts of kindness can create a ripple effect.
Exactly. They all make a difference.
It's pretty amazing how much ground Tony Robbins covers in this book. It's like a masterclass in personal development.
He doesn't hold back, does he? It's like he's handing us the blueprints to redesign our entire lives from the inside out.
Exactly. And the best part is, he doesn't just tell us what to do. He explains the why behind it. He breaks down how our minds work and then gives us practical strategies to create real change.
It's incredibly empowering. We really do have more power than we realize.
Totally. We're not victims of our circumstances,
Yeah.
We have the ability to make different choices, to shift our beliefs, to actually change our behavior and create a life that feels meaningful to us.
We have to own that power, right? Step into it and start creating the life we want, not waiting for permission or some magic solution, but actually making it happen.
Exactly. And what I love about Robbins is he doesn't just talk the talk. He gives us the tools to walk the walk.
Right. He gives us specific things we can do, like strategies for dealing with our emotions, setting goals that matter, aligning our lives with our values, even transforming the way we talk to ourselves.
And he doesn't present personal growth as this finish line we cross. It's a lifelong journey of learning, growing, evolving.
Totally. It's about embracing the journey, those twists and turns, and always staying curious.
Like becoming lifelong students, constantly seeking new knowledge, pushing our own boundaries.
Absolutely. And Robbins reminds us that one of the most powerful ways to grow is by giving back to others. It's about shifting that focus from what's in it for me to how can I make a difference.
It's amazing how much richer and more meaningful our own lives become when we focus on making a positive impact on the world around us.
It's like this beautiful cycle of giving and receiving. And it doesn't have to be these grand gestures. It can be as simple as showing up for the people we love, volunteering our time, or just being kind.
Every little bit counts. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Awaken the Giant Within, what's one thing you hope our listeners take away from this conversation?
Well, we've covered a lot, but I think the biggest takeaway is this. You have the power within you to create the life you want. It's not always easy, but with the right tools and the willingness to put in the work, anything is possible.
Beautifully said. And to our listeners, we leave you with this. What one small step can you take today to start living in alignment with your values, your beliefs, and that compelling vision you have for your future? Remember, the power to awaken the giant within lies within you. Now go out there and make it happen.